On today's episode of Locked On Mariners, we'll go over the team's latest pickup on the waiver wire, how Seattle's bullpen could shake out, and if Justin Hollander and crew could get involved in the rumored trade discussions going on between the Marlins and Twins. All that and more coming up. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is Wednesday, January 18th, 2023. This is Trident Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you so much for making us your first listen, subscribe, like, and turn on alerts if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform if you like what you hear. And if you want to hear from us even more, please consider signing up for our Patreon. The link, as well as our social accounts, is in the description below. On the show today, we'll discuss another interesting reliever pickup by the Mariners, how that position group as a whole could shake out this spring and into the regular season, and if the Mariners could find themselves involved in what could be a pretty big trade coming up on the horizon. But before we get into all that, a reminder, we're giving away a $50 Mariners gift card to one lucky listener. And if you win, but you're outside the state of Washington, you'll instead receive a $50 MLB Shop or Fanatics gift card. All you have to do to enter is subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you already have, you're already in. So you're good to go. The deadline to enter is next Tuesday, January 24th at 11:59 p.m. Pacific. We will then select the winner from our YouTube subscriber list and announce it on next Wednesday's show, which is January 25th. Now, if you missed it on Twitter last night, we have an even bigger announcement to make, but we're not making that on today's show. You got to wait until Friday's show, specifically the end of Friday's show. But trust us, it's worth the wait. You'll want to know what this is. It's pretty big. It's pretty big. We are up to something, folks. It's pretty big. All right, Colby. Let's get into our first topic of the day. The Mariners made a move. Can you believe it? They've been pretty quiet. There's been a lot of time in between moves for the Mariners this offseason, but they did make a move. It's a small move. They claimed right-handed reliever JB Bukauskas from the Arizona Diamondbacks. He was recently DFA'd by Arizona. 26-year-old former first-round draft pick of the Houston Astros came over to Arizona in the Zach Greinke deal, and he hasn't really pitched at the major league level. 17 and a third innings worth of work at the major league level in 2021 for the Diamondbacks. That's about it. Dealt with some shoulder issues this past season, threw about 20-ish innings at the AAA level, pitched a couple innings down in the complex league, as well as he rehabbed. But that's about it. But this is a pretty interesting get for the Mariners, I think. So tell us more about Bukauskas.
Yeah, 6 foot tall, about 210 pounds, pretty good athlete, throws strikes. Came out of North Carolina, first round pick with the Astros. They really thought they could turn him into a mid-rotation starter. And, given their history, it's pretty safe assumption. And he actually got off to a really good start. He was in Double-A by the end of his first full season in pro ball, and he was just jumping levels so quickly and producing at those levels that it seemed like he was going to, jump to the big leagues and be a pretty successful starter right away. Then he kind of stalled out in 2019. He stuck at Double-A before he was traded. In the Greinke deal, and he just never really found it. Obviously, 2020 was a lost year for most minor leaguers. And then he got his chance in 2021, and it didn't work out too well for him. The numbers aren't very good, but when you go and you look at what he actually brought to the table that year, it's a 93 to 95 mile an hour fastball that doesn't have tremendous spin. It doesn't get a ton of whiffs. It's a problem. He doesn't get a lot of value out of the fastball. At least he didn't in 2021. Whiff rate of just like 9.8%, something like that. And that's terrible. But thankfully the slider, which was actually probably his third best pitch in college, really played up well. He was over 40% whiff rate on that pitch. It was his go-to pitch. He could get lefties and righties to swing and miss at it. Located it pretty well. It was an effective pitch for him. He just didn't really have an effective third pitch because the changeup, which was his best pitch coming out of school, he didn't throw it. Like I don't know if maybe it regressed or he didn't feel confident with it, but he just hardly threw it. He threw it about 9, 10, 11% of the time. And that's a pitch that if it was as good as it was in college, you think he would throw it a little bit more than that. So,
Mhm.
yeah, he has some control. He had some control issues once he got to the big leagues, but last year, even dealing with a shoulder injury, his walks per nine were great. Strikeouts per nine were down a little bit, but again, kind of working your way back from a shoulder injury, those things tend to happen. So we'll see how he is a year away from that injury, or an off season away from that injury. Um, but yeah, right now the most likely profile is, I should say, middle reliever, 93 to 95 with the fastball, really good slider, and a changeup that he keeps in his back pocket that used to be plus. I mean, it
Mhm.
used to be a legit, 60, 65 grade pitch. Um, we'll see. Maybe the plan is for the Mariners to get him to use that changeup more and get back to that, or maybe it's to have him throw his slider more. He was still fastball heavy. He threw the slider a lot in 2021,
Mhm.
but it was still about 46% fastball to 42% slider. Maybe they ask him to switch that ratio. We know that the Mariners have had good luck doing that with certain pitchers. So we'll see what happens. My guess would be is that we're going to see him quite a few times in spring training, assuming he's healthy, and he will start the year in AAA Tacoma. He does have one option left, so they can kind of yo-yo him back and forth within the rules in the 2023 season. But I think when he is sent down, I don't think it's a given that he is going to be sent down to pitch out of the Rainiers bullpen.
Mhm.
Because, like I said, he throws strikes. He's got a good slider. He's had a plus changeup in the past, and he's 93 to 95. If you can get, if you can get that fastball, on a different plane, maybe, or you can tunnel it better with a slider, or maybe you can find a way to add some RPMs or some miles per hour. Um, I think there's a chance here that he's still a number 4 starter. He's 26, so we'll see what happens. Um, but yeah, my guess is that he is in Tacoma for the first few months, um, probably in the Rainiers rotation. That would be my guess. And then if he does come up with Seattle, it'll probably be as a reliever. But I think there's a lot to like here. This is a really interesting arm that's definitely worthy of a 40-man spot.
So he joins a pretty interesting group of arms the Mariners have collected here over the course of the offseason with guys like Trevor Gott and Justin Topa, Easton McGee, Gabe Spire. Now you throw Bukauskas into this. It's an interesting group. Now, to make room for Bukauskas on the 40-man roster, the Mariners DFA'd Alberto Rodriguez, the outfield prospect that he acquired from the Blue Jays in the Taijuan Walker deal a couple of years ago, and his development has kind of stalled. He's 22 years old now, and repeated high A, or well, didn't necessarily repeat because he only played 7 games down there in 2021, but they were hoping that he was going to be able to make another jump here over the course of the season. He just didn't. 106 WRC plus, 261 average, 333 on base, slugged under 400%. So yeah, just not a great year for Alberto Rodriguez. And I think, taking all that into account, taking his age into account, taking the fact that he might have to repeat high A again this year before he makes the jump to double A, I think it's safe to assume that no team is going to pick him up and add him to their 40-man roster, use a 40-man roster spot on him, because he's 2 years away from contributing at the major league level for not just the Mariners, but for any team. I don't think anyone's going to want to take that chance on him. So yeah, any thoughts on Rodriguez before we move on here?
No, he was a fringe top 30 guy for me. He did just slip in, but he's, 27, 28, and I could easily throw him out and replace him with somebody just as good. He just barely made it. He's not right now. I don't think he's a major leaguer, a future major leaguer. There's no
Sure.
defense there. It is 45 grade at best in the corner. And if that's who you are defensively, you have to hit, and you have to hit for power. He didn't hit for power at all last year after, spending an entire year. He's 20. I think he spent the entire year at 21 years old um, in high A ball. That's not old for that level. So it's not the end of the world that he has to repeat that level, but it's certainly not a good sign. And if you're repeating high A ball, you're not going to be in the big leagues anytime soon. It's going to be at least a couple years. And most teams have a stacked 40 man right now. They don't have room. They
Mhm.
can't hide guys on their 40 man on the IL until they report to spring training. I think there's only 5 teams that have open spots on their 40 man rosters right now. And even those teams are not going to take a shot on Rodriguez. I would be pretty shocked if he did get claimed If he does, I mean, good for him. There's obviously benefits to being on the 40-man, but it is not a loss to the Seattle Mariners. He's long since been passed by guys like Cade Marlowe, and guys like even from the offensive side, guys like Bobby Bombs. He's on the back end of this, and it's a big year for him. He has to hit in Everett, and he probably has to make his debut in Double A Arkansas, or his prospect status in the Mariners organization will be one that they'll just release him. There's just not a ton of value here.
Yeah, so I think it's safe to assume that he's going to stay within the Mariners organization.
Yep.
And so, we'll see if he can get back on track here. But yeah, it was I mean, like, you look at some of the other names that are on the Mariners 40-man roster, and you go, like, you look at someone like Brennan Bernardino, for example, and you go, like, all right, maybe they could have just DFA'd him, But
at least there's a chance he helps you this year.
Yeah, but it makes sense overall to DFA someone like Rodriguez, who's not going to factor into this year's plans or even next year's plans, for that matter.
Right.
Why use a 40-man roster? I mean, eventually you're going to have to DFA him anyway, because you're going to get to a point where you do have a roster crunch, and someone like Rodriguez just doesn't make sense to carry on your 40-man roster, considering where you are right now and the fact that you're competing at the moment. All right, so we're going to talk more about the bullpen, how someone like JB Bukauskas could fit into the competition there, and just the bullpen overall, how we want to see these guys deployed. All that good stuff here in just a moment. But real quick, a reminder, this episode of Locked On Mariners is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From pro football to basketball, we've got it all over at BetOnline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can even find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline is where the game starts. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. So, Colby, I mentioned the amount of guys that the Mariners have added to their group of relievers here over the course of this offseason. Some interesting guys. They did trade Eric Swanson in the Teoscar Hernandez deal, but everyone else from last year's bullpen, which was fantastic for the most part, is returning. So let's just start here before we really get into the weeds of this. Who are the locks in the Mariners bullpen as of today?
Munoz, Brash, and Seawald.
No Castillo, no Penn Murphy, no one like that?
I think they're probably a tier below.
Gotcha.
Because I think, for example, if one of the guys you mentioned like just blows everybody out of the water, maybe it's Topa, maybe it's Spires. I don't know which one it would be, but if somebody like that blows somebody out of the water, I could see the team, trading Castillo at the end of spring training, or even demoting Festa or Murphy. Those guys are both middle guys, and if you think this new guy is better, then you take that shot. And if he's not, the other two guys are sitting there in AAA ready to go. So for that reason, I wouldn't put them in the lock category, but I think it's highly likely that we're going to see Diego Castillo, Trevor Gott, Festa, and who am I forgetting?
Penn Murphy.
Yeah. It's easy to forget Penn, despite the good year he had. I think those four guys are, I would say, safe bets, but I wouldn't call them locks.
Yeah. So that's pretty much your bullpen right there, more or less. I mean, the other spot in the bullpen likely goes to Chris Flexen or Marco Gonzalez, at least as things currently stand. And we know that the Mariners want to keep 8. They've always kept 8. That's always been their preference. They've even tried to keep 9, but now MLB, of course, has roster restrictions that limit you to just 13 pitchers at a time. So of the guys that we didn't mention here, so the Justin Topas of the world, the JB Bukauskases of the world, the Easton McGee's of the world, the Gabe Spires of the world, which of these guys do you think is the most likely to push a Penn Murphy, a Matt Festa, or change the Mariners' mind on keeping Marco or Flexen in the bullpen?
I think the Marco Flexen thing is just monetary. So if they can't find a trade partner, they're going to keep them on the roster, which makes sense because you still do want starting pitching depth. And those two guys are at least number 5 starters. So you don't just want to give them away for nothing. But I think, if you're talking about that group of guys, I think it actually might be Spire is the one who's most likely to push one of those guys. He's, lefty, which is nice. We know the Mariners like to have a lefty in the bullpen. They don't necessarily, go out of their way to value lefty on lefty matchups and stuff like that, but they do like to have one in their pen. Spire's a lefty. He's got a pretty good slider. Fastball that 95 up in the zone really plays up. So I think he's the most likely guy to push somebody. I Topa could push a guy out of the bullpen, but it seems unlikely. We'll see where he's at physically. But I think it's probably those two. I think JB is probably headed. Like I said, I think there's a really good shot he is in Tacoma's rotation, and the same goes for Easton McGee. So I think those two guys are headed to Tacoma to keep stretched out. So yeah, I think it's probably Spire, and then Topo would probably be second. And even though he isn't, a part of this group of minor league free agents or whatever, I think Isaiah Campbell is the other guy to watch here to
Yep.
push one of these probable safe guys back to Tacoma. But I would say Spire is probably the most likely of that group of four.
So with the World Baseball Classic coming up, we know that Matt Brash, Andres Munoz, Matt Festa, they're going to compete in that. So they'll be, at least theoretically speaking, a little bit more ramped up than usual around that time of year at the end of March or mid-March rather. So with that in mind, how would you like to see these guys deployed right out of the gate? Do you want to maybe take it a little more cautiously with them, considering that they're likely going to have some legitimate innings already on their arms, or do you maybe push it a little more with those guys because they've already ramped up a little bit more?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, particularly with the bullpen guys, because we don't know how long the tournament is going to go on for them. Like, it's entirely possible that Festa pitches one inning in the World Baseball Classic, and that's not going to change anything, assuming he stays healthy. Knock on wood. No soggy arms this time around. But yeah, like Munoz might pitch once, Brash might pitch once. Like none of those three teams are like huge favorites to advance either. So we need to keep that in mind. And also, I think there's a possibility Diego Castillo might be pitching for the Dominican Republic. We'll see. We'll see what happens when the official roster comes out. But yeah, I think those guys, depending on the workload, I think you just actually can kind of ease them off when they come back to camp. And just have them ready for their regular workload, on opening day. So I don't think it changes much. Again, barring some kind of injury or some kind of, blister issue or some kind of, something minor that pushes them out a couple weeks. And then at that point, maybe you do ease into that. But assuming they make it through the World Baseball Classic okay, and they're not, in the finals in the last, a week before opening day and all that stuff, then I think it's relatively the same. You just kind of keep rolling with what your plan was. But those three guys or possibly four guys, they are going to open up opportunities to other arms, which is why we're going to see a lot of Campbell. We're going to see Travis Kuhn. We're going to see Spire, and we're going to see, Topa. We're going to see these guys because A, we're going to see them anyways, but B, there are going to be a couple more innings available than there would be in a normal spring.
Munoz started to wear down a little bit in the postseason because he was being used a lot. Seawald as well was used a lot. Brash even later on was used quite a bit. Now you don't have Eric Swanson, so how do you want to see the Mariners kind of handle the workloads of those guys, especially someone like Andres Munoz, who throws very, very hard? And who do you want to, who do you think is the guy that needs to step up here with the absence of Eric Swanson?
Michael Fulmer or Andrew Chafin.
Matt Moore. Is Matt Moore still available?
Yeah, he's still a thing. Yeah, still out there.
Yeah.
I think this is a pretty good year, and this is why I think it's important. I think the Mariners need to be, what's the word here? Liberal with IL stints. I mean, you have this group of guys that you like their stuff, right? And it's like, hey, like if Paul Sewald comes to us and he's got like, a left shoulder like discomfort, just put him on the IL for 15 days and call up Campbell and just be very cautious with this, because while you don't have, like, there's a lot that could go wrong with this bullpen, you do have a lot of interesting arms in it. So I again, obviously you don't fake injuries to put guys on the IL. That's not what I'm suggesting, but I think you have to be careful here. And I think you do kind of have to rotate through this back end, or I guess technically the front end of your bullpen. And, if you need Murphy to be the guy to go out there and take the hit, and then you send him down to AAA. That's just what you have to do. I mean, you gotta find a way to manage these guys. I will say that I think one thing that's going to help is I think we're going to get a better Robbie Ray. I think we're going to get Luis Castillo, obviously, for 15, 20 more starts than we got him for last year. That's fewer innings the bullpen will likely have to cover. And we are going to have George Kirby with very little or no restrictions. So those three factors in the starting rotation are going to take more stress off of that bullpen. So instead of having to cover, 3 2/3 a night, maybe now they only have to cover 2 1/3 or 3, or what I mean? And obviously there's going to be blow up games here and there, but I think just having those guys, full force and for the entire year are really going to help eat a lot of innings that would otherwise go to, the Gabe Spire types, or the sixth inning isn't going to be Matt Festa anymore, because that's going to be Luis Castillo or George Kirby.
So switching gears here, Marlins and Twins have, I don't know, for the last week and a half, 2 weeks, have been rumored to be in trade discussions with one another, with Pablo Lopez, the former Mariners right-handed pitcher who was dealt quite a while ago. That was the David Phelps deal, I believe, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Not fun to remember. Sorry for reminding you guys of that. But yeah, Pablo Lopez has been, a guy that's been long rumored to be on the trade market here for a while. It seems like this might be finally coming to a head, because the Marlins have pitchers on pitchers on pitchers on pitchers, and it seems like they're just bound to trade one of them, and Lopez has been kind of that one guy that everyone's looked to. So the Twins may very well be the landing destination for him, but Colby, you have an idea here for the Mariners to get involved. I'm not really sure if it's getting involved in a 3-team deal here with the Twins and Marlins, or if it's just getting involved with one of these teams on some of the names that we're hearing about.
Yeah, I think there's room here for a 3-team deal. Apparently, the sticking point is that the Twins really don't want to trade Arise, and the Marlins only want like major league proven hitter for Lopez. So obviously, like, Kepler is not going to work. He's not going to carry the freight for the Twins for the Twins. So you kind of look at it and you say, is there a way that the Mariners can get involved here? They don't really have that, proven major league bat that they can spare right now. So probably not in that way. But if we're talking about, hey, you know what, the Marlins, they like Larnick or Kirilloff or whatever, but they want an extra piece, and the Mariners can maybe provide that extra piece. And there's some interesting guys on both sides here that make sense for the Mariners. We've talked about Kepler a lot. If Larnick is available, I think he makes some sense to a certain extent. The Marlins, obviously they have Sixto Sanchez and maybe a reliever, somebody to help out in that bullpen like Steven Okert. I think he's a pretty interesting guy. So I think there's a way they could get involved in a 3-team deal. It's just a matter of, are the Twins willing to trade Luis Arise? And that seems to be the sticking point. It's also worth noting that apparently the Cardinals have asked about Lopez, and they were told, we want Nootbaar, and the Cardinals said no. So it looks pretty clear to me like the Marlins are targeting major league hitters. They want a major league bat, preferably an outfielder, but Arise is an outfielder. He's pretty much a DH. So like, do the Mariners have that to go get Pablo Lopez straight up? Probably not, unless, and I'm not saying I would do this because I probably wouldn't, but Ty France for Pablo Lopez. I mean, it's 3 years of Ty France for 2 years of Pablo Lopez. Keep that in mind. Lopez, as I wait for Ty to get back and do his job, Lopez is, he's probably a number 4, or like a really good number 4, solid number 3. And you only get him for 2 years. There's also some concern about, he hasn't really had like a full season worth of work all that often. Then again, neither is Ty France. So, but yeah, just from the top of my head, like, oh, they want a major league hitter in return for Pablo Lopez. The Mariners don't really have that, except for Ty France, because you're not going to trade JP Crawford. I mean, you're not trading Teo or Julio. It doesn't make sense to trade Gino, right? And Wong obviously isn't going to get it done. You're not trading Raleigh. Kelnick doesn't have the value. Ty France might.
Okay, I'll bite. At this, why does this make sense? And I know that you said you wouldn't do this, but why does this make sense now at this point in the offseason?
Yeah, it doesn't. That's
to trade Ty France.
I mean,
yeah.
like I guess if you go out and get Luke Voigt
and let's be clear about it, for a luxury.
Yeah,
Luke Voigt, come on.
I don't know, like Lopez. The Mariners rotation isn't.
You don't
so
need
good.
Pablo Lopez.
You don't need him, but you also don't need Ty France. Like, let's be like.
I would argue that you need Ty France a hell of a lot more than you need Pablo Lopez.
Do you
right now?
Because Ty France is probably Ty France is probably like hitting 6th in this lineup.
That's great and all, but you still need the offense.
Yeah, but don't you think you can go get a first baseman a lot easier than you can like a mid rotation starter?
I mean, like, all right.
Yeah.
Like if you went out and you traded for Pablo Lopez and you turn around and you acquired like CJ Crone or someone like that, okay, I could wrap my head around that a little bit better.
Okay, would you rather have Lopez and Crone or France
or
and
Ty France
and Flexen? Like it seems pretty easy to me.
Yeah. All right,
So,
let's hear from you guys. Let's hear from you guys.
Just throwing that out there.
What do you guys think? Let us know down below if you're listening on YouTube or if you're watching on YouTube, or if you want to yell if you're just listening to us in your car or whatever and you want to yell at us, lockedonmariners@gmail.com. Let us know.
Mm-hmm. I just, like I said, I want to be clear here. I don't think I'm on your side. I don't think it makes a lot of sense for the Mariners to do this.
Sure.
But if they're going to, right, Ty France for Pablo Lopez, and then you go and you sign, Luke Voigt, or you go and you acquire, CJ Crone or Christian Walker or whatever, or you go get a third baseman and Gino Suarez as your first baseman. I don't know, but it's a lot easier to find a first baseman than it is a mid rotation starter. So, like, I know you're thinking about the lineup right now, but let me paint a different picture for you.
Okay.
All right. Luis Castillo, George Kirby, Logan Gilbert, Pablo Lopez, Robbie Ray. How many playoff series you winning with that rotation? A lot. So just throw that out there.
Yeah.
I mean, you might have to win those games 2-1, but like, So just again, crazy idea. I just wanted to throw it out there. I think it's a fun one at least. I would not do it. I would rather have Ty France.
You're unhinged. You're unhinged.
You tell me that's not a fun conversation though.
It is. It is.
See,
it is. Good job. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And then you put Pablo Lopez in your trade package for Brian Reynolds.
Wow.
Like, not just a hat rack, my friend.
Damn.
He's
flipping Ty France just to get Brian Reynolds.
I'm playing like 5D chess right now, so but no, I thought that was kind of a fun idea that just popped into my head. I was like, oh, it looks like the Marlins want, the initial process was like, how do they get involved in a 3-team deal? I was like, well, what would it cost them just to go get Lopez? And then Nootbaar, Arise. I'm like, the only guy who kind of fits that mold for Seattle is France. So, would you do France for Lopez? No, but is it the worst trade I've ever heard?
But what if? What if? What if?
Quick Ty, grade that trade.
Oh man. See, the problem is I got to give you a pretty high score because it is creative. So 60.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
But most of it is writing creativity. It is writing the creativity score. From a sense perspective, 40. 35.
It's not lower than no. It's at least a 45 on the sense perspective. At least it is at the very least Emerson Hancock's fastball.
There's so much that you just said that it gives me pain inside. All right, that's gonna do it for our show. Thank you so much.
The reason it gives Ty pain inside is because he knows that it kind of makes sense.
I'm not admitting anything. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Trident Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at @LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Dane Gonzalez, the CANEGNZLZ, and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. And thank you again for making us your first listen. Now make your second listen. Locked On MLB Prospects. Host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast, just like us. And with that, have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you on Friday. Peace.